Welcome to the Configure It Done podcast. The Configure It Done podcast is a place where successful thought leaders in the SAP space come to share their leadership styles, their tips, and their unique stories on how to run successful large-scale SAP programs. Listen to the podcast to learn from their successes, their failures, their career stories, and their inspirations.
This podcast is in partnership with the Black Dog Institute, who aim to create a mentally healthier world for everyone. If you wish to support the cause, please donate via the link below.
And I reckon we've got one of the best guests. And I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Thank you.
Not only have we got Peter Gilmer back.
Oh,
we've got John Golfin.
Oh, look! I'll be honest. It took Peter Gilmer to get me here.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is my secession plan for the world of IT.
Here we go. Started. Only just got on the podcast. It's already started.
Well, no pressure.
Let the games begin.
Yeah.
I only brought him on because he accused me of, on my podcast of doing a whole lot of motherhood statements. So what we're expecting from John today is the true reality
the
of project
grit.
management.
The grit.
Yeah, what really happens behind the
Grit
scenes.
and comedy.
Yeah.
How do you know each other, first of all?
We worked on my very last project, the Lion project, which ran for 3 years out here at Sydney Olympic
reflection
Park.
of his project management style.
And went for 3 years, and we obviously we managed the very last year of it in the first year of COVID, right? We went live in that year, so that turned everything, the whole world on its head. It was probably the most challenging of all projects. You know, we really had to think on our feet. And I met Pete during that time, and Pete was one of the pillars, right? He understood method, he understood delivery, he understood people. You know, the technology is always secondary, right? There's enough people that know the technology, but how that relates to what the business is doing and how we run it and keep the team interested, keep them bonded, keep the business involved, that's like a chess game. It's diplomacy at its best. And Peter understands that. He understands diplomacy. It's not a tick and flick for Pete. Like, where's your project plan? Where's your report? Where's your risk assessment? Where's your issue log? I know when I hear that from somebody, they're not a project manager. They're a project administrator. But when they say, hey, John, so how do you think you're going to roll this thing out? You know, are you leaning towards function? Are you leaning towards geography? How are you going to handle this? I know they're trying to unravel the puzzle. That's project management. You know, that's chess playing that I'll talk a little bit more about. But it's all about people, and this Peter understands people. He can read it.
Peter hates nice words about him. Look at him sitting there. You can't smile, Peter. It's fine.
No, that's right.
Accept the praise. Accept the praise.
Look, I'm a little bit like Yoda discovering Luke Skywalker and thinking,
Lord.
this guy's going to reset the Force. He's going to bring everything back into balance. That's how I feel about Pete. Quite honestly,
He knows how much I'm sparing right now.
that's it.
I'm an Irish Catholic from a family of 10. We don't like compliments.
And the only way to make him stronger is for me to die, to step out of the picture, right? So that's basically what I did. I've been retired now for a year, just so this guy can restore the balance.
Are you actually retired, though? It's a good question. Are you retired?
It is. Yes, I am. I'm literally retired. But when if you ask me about the most ideal project, that'll bring me out of retirement, and I'll explain that when we get there.
Okay, no problem. And over to Luke Skywalker.
Luke Skywalker.
Tell us a little bit about John. For those of you that don't know John, I'm sure there's not many, but tell us a little bit about John.
So I met John at Line maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. Big program. I think it'd been running for about 6 months. Eventually around for 4 years. And John was really the glue that held everybody together. And it was fantastic for me because, you know, up to that point, I've been going through a couple of different projects and programs, working for individuals that I don't know if they were at the best of their game, and I wasn't learning from them. And I met John. I could just tell his experience was just so pivotal to Lion's success, and that I could learn so much from it. And that was the case. I was really fortunate to learn from somebody who obviously had been in the trenches and had done a number of difficult programs, learned a lot of tricks, and more importantly was willing to invest in us as individuals and pass on that experience. And I'm still at Line. I'm grateful that I met John.
And I could also drink more than him.
So let's learn a bit more about that then John. Let's go back. Let's learn about you as a person first of all.
Yep.
Can you tell us a bit about your background, your hobbies, and
Absolutely.
and what your pastimes are? Yeah.
Yeah, no problems. So Bondi Beach, born and bred. Parents both from Greece, came out in the 50s, early 50s. At school, I wasn't very studious until I hit probably 5th or 6th class. But my 5th and 6th class teacher said, she took me aside and she said, "You're wasting your time. You've got potential. You've got to start thinking about your work rather than play or whatever." So I think I turned the corner then. Very studious at high school, Sydney Boys High, and then went on to study aeronautical engineering at Sydney Uni. And why did I choose aeronautical engineering? Because when I was a kid, I wanted to be an aeroplane. I didn't want to be a pilot or an engineer to design and build it. I wanted to be an aeroplane, which was very, very strange. And so the only way I thought I could do that is, well, let me understand how birds fly or how aeroplanes fly, and then maybe I can figure out what I want to do in between. So I did aeronautical engineering. I graduated. I worked for Qantas while I was studying. And then it was a classic fork in the road moment. With aero engineering, you do a shitload of computing, right? You're using mid and mainframes just to do calculations, just to do an assignment. So I learned a lot about computing by default. And then when I was working at Qantas, we were exposed to all facets of the organisation: sales, marketing, operations. And when I went into the operations room and saw every aircraft plotted around the world with all the telexes going and a computer trying to figure out how to crew up those flights and who should stop where and for how long and when should the plane refuel, what's the best route to take, when should we put this pilot on versus... I thought, computers are going to run the world. This is fantastic. They're going to run the world. So all of a sudden, I looked behind the aircraft at all the operational stuff that was going on, and I thought, nah, I want to be part of that. I don't want to be the puppet. I want to be the person holding the strings. So along came the PC. Microsoft DOS had just been invented, and I went even crazier. And I thought, oh my God, these supercomputers, mainframes we're using, this is the beginning of the end for them, because computing is going to get small. So I decided, no, I need to go back to uni. I need to learn about business. I need to find out how technology and business can coexist, because I thought that was more interesting than building an aircraft, because all of that was behind building aircraft anyway. And then all of a sudden, management consulting was born at that time. And all the big eight at the time, Price Waterhouse, Coopers, IBM, Arthur Andersen back then, went on an explosive recruiting run. And they came after anyone technical, anyone who could, do their sums, mathematicians, scientists, whoever, engineers. And they basically recruited us straight out of uni. And I decided, no, I'm going to go with this. I'm not going to go back to uni. I'm going to take that job. I don't know what to expect. These are business consultants, and I'm an aeroplane designer. There were archaeologists joining with me. Bruce McKinnon joined with me at that same time. So did Greg Carroll, and they taught us marketing. They taught us accounting. They taught us industrial relations. They taught us manufacturing, because we had to build systems for those, because back then everything was custom made, right, on mainframes. Then I did all of that, and then all of a sudden I thought, no, what if you don't have to build things? What if somebody figures out how to build a system that does everything and just makes it configurable, sells it to people for a reasonable amount of money, but let's say, 20% of what it would cost to custom make it. And all you need to do is just set parameters. And I told my partner at the time, I want to do this. I don't know what it's called. I want to do prefabricated software. And then I realized it was called package software. That's what I want to do. He said, have I got the job? He went away, came back a few months later, and he said, there's this little German company called SAP that we just did an exclusive deal with. So they're popular in Germany, but they want to go global, and they want to use a major consulting company to help them do it. And Arthur Andersen was selected because they were all over the world. All the biggest companies in the world had Arthur Andersen as their auditor. So that was probably Hasso-Plattner's greatest ever move. And then his second greatest ever move was to limit the contract to 3 years, not to do it open-ended, right? Because it exploded, as we all know. So I got involved in that. And step one was to bring SAP to Australia to trial it before it went into the US. Because SAP and Arthur Andersen didn't mind stuff-ups in Australia, but they didn't want to stuff up in the United States. That was a big market. So that was it. I got together with a group of people and we brought SAP out here. I met Hasso-Plattner. We had dinner with him. We met all of the key executives at the time. It was a very flat structure back then. You had access to the CEO anytime you wanted to. And hired all the salespeople, hired all the first round of consultants. And there I was, configuring, looking up tables. There was no IMG back then. You had to work out what tables to set up for the software. And so that was a game changer for me because, after that, SAP in Australia just went through the ceiling. I got to manage all the first big projects, got to code two-way and three-way matching. That was my code. Went back to Germany and got incorporated in the product because that's what people wanted. I did standing journals, the repeating journals. But I think the best thing I ever did with SAP was when SAP bought this POS company. I forget their name now. They were Canadian, and we put it into Myer at all stores. And the board was very nervous about signing off on it because no cash, no business in retail. And they said, and therein lies the dilemma. How do I solve that problem? I can explain technically what we're going to do, and it's not going to mean anything to a board. So I said, what if we were to test the system in real life, in a real store, on the live system? We do UAT in the live environment, not a copy of the live environment. All my architects exploded and had fits. And anyway, I had worked out how to do it before I told anybody. So then I told the architects. The architects said, that took them 2 or 3 days. They said, no, we think this is possible. So we carved out areas within the live system, carved out areas within the P&L reporting so that we could tell that it was us, and we did everything through the furniture department. And I reckon that was the pinnacle. That was the best thing I ever did was then. So that's how I got into SAP, from designing aircraft to working out how they're used to ferry people around and the equipment that lies beyond that. And from then on, it was SAP from then on. But I've done a lot of non-SAP stuff. And the common denominator is always people. Mm-hmm. People make IT projects hard, not the technology. People do. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk a little bit more about people. So if you know how to read people, if you know how to handle, and that doesn't mean manipulating them or being rude to them or whatever. Hang on. It doesn't mean that.
Did you not accuse me of not being honest with my audience about the use of manipulation to get what you want?
People
call it influencing.
Look,
right?
it's
because it's a nicer way of saying it. And manipulation is in its in its context it sounds dirty, right?
It's not a bad word. When physios manipulate muscles. They don't massage them, they manipulate them. So manipulating is not a bad word.
But let me ask you, but the reason why you're talking about manipulation and people and reading people and how people are so important in the project, and you keep talking about people skills, is because the way forward for any project is by being able to, I hate to say it, but make sure that people are sort of focused on getting the same outcome you want from a project, right?
Working together.
Sorry, maybe it's a different
complementing each other.
Working together, but for what purpose, right? Not just working together. You've got a vision that you need to deliver this project, right? You've got your scope, you've got your benefits, etc. You've got a time frame, but you understand what are the roles that these individuals need to play to support that, and how do I influence those people on the role that they need to play to get the project moving forward.
It's like a football team.
So it's not influencing them to sort of, without a purpose in mind.
It's not. You shall now work 24 hours for me. It's not like that, right? Yeah. It's like a coach and a football game.
You're talking my language now.
If
John,
the coach knows each individual player, if the coach has played every position, and that's my gift to everybody here today, you want to know how to read people, you want to know how to understand them, do their job. Be a tester at some point in your career. Do data conversion at some point in your career. Do the change management. Do the PMO. Do some programming. Because then you understand what that is and the brain and mentality and attitude that goes behind it, and therefore you can manipulate it later on. Do you see what I mean? So it's not read the chapter on testing or do a test on that. Do that person's job, even for a little while.
So do you believe the best leaders have done a little bit of everything?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do a little bit of everything. Now, we're people with various capabilities. Some people can't do everything. Do as much as you can, right? Do as much as you can, because the more you understand about roles, the more you can judge. Is the right person in that role? I know what that role is because I've done it. Is that the right personality in that role? And is it the right brain in that role? Because that's the other secret. It's not just about the resume capability. It's about that person's character and their personality and the way they deal with others around them.
Yeah.
Right?
I would agree with that. Like and that's why I love the recruiting industry as well. What you see is most of the leaders, 99% of the leaders, have actually done the job.
I think that's what it means to say be a follower first before you're a leader. That's why when people ask me, are you a leader of this project? I say, right now I'm a follower. Right now I'm with the herd because I want to understand who they are and what their capabilities are. And that's why when I do projects from start to finish, the most important part of the project for me is right at the beginning when I get to choose the team. Mm-hmm. And I get to do it with the client, with the business. And I say to them, take 3 months to pick the right team. Don't listen to the executive or to the board that says, quick, we've got to start it today. Because what they'll do is they'll put any old shit on the project and you'll have to deal with it in 6 months' time. There'll be delays. The budget will go through the ceiling. It's better to time out, let me and my counterpart, right? So the client project manager and I get together and we pick our team. It's like when we were kids, we picked the cricket team, we picked the thing, we took our jolly old time.
Is there an argument too that until you sort of bleed with, yes, there's a initial sort of perspective on who you want in that team, right? And that's really important. And obviously CVs, experience, the whole talent profiling is really important. Have they done previous projects that are similar to the one that you're looking at, et cetera, et cetera. But then it comes down to, after working with them for a while, really, do they know what they're doing? Do you work well together? And you almost need to be in the trenches a little bit with them. Absolutely right. So a high-performing team isn't just something you build after 3 months. It's you're constantly evolving and constantly...
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how do you do that? Take them out for a beer or a coffee, spend some time with them, get to know them. There's it is great personal time, that you invest, but they're doing a critical role. You've got to be comfortable. You've got to be sure that they're going to rise to the occasion, because you don't know up front. Like you said, your gut tells you, let's start with this person, but I need to check in with them at various points.
Good segue, and this is obviously jumping around, but like in terms of your project management methodology and your style, how would you classify? What would you think is really the kind of the key flavor of how you operate?
Yes. First of all, methodology. Do you know that there's no such word in the English dictionary? No, methodology doesn't exist.
Really?
It's method or methods.
Right.
So delivery method or delivery methods is the I don't know, the Oxford anointed word. There's no such thing as methodology. And, I only learnt that a few years ago. I didn't even know. I didn't even know myself. I think I tried to translate it into Greek, and it just came up blank. And then I went to the Oxford Dictionary. Anyway, that's a side
Where's
thing.
the word come from then?
I don't know. I think we just invented it. IT just invented it. Like we invent
It does a lot of words.
lots of words. We invent so many words. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so in the early years, right, when there was no HR, and I have to preface my answer with that, there was just a payroll office. You go to a window and you collect your cash. So when I joined Arthur Andersen, there was no HR. So back then, the partner influence on us was command and control, right? You are the commander, and if anything goes wrong, I'm going to shoot you. If anything goes right, I'm going to get the pay rise. It's command and control. And even the clients that I worked for in the early days, Philips, Caltex, they would get to know me. That we'd meet each other at the beginning of the project. Then they would hand me a gun. They said, the bullets are here. Shoot anyone you want. Just get this project over the line in this amount of time for this amount of money. You do whatever you want. So it was very much heavy hand command and control. And I got used to it. That's the way I operated for quite a few years until, the industry formed, until the methods improved, until clients better understood all the factors that go into making a project longer and more expensive, some of them being their own people, not deciding things and not towing the line. So then it kind of morphed into bribery and guilt. So that was probably, so the R2 world was probably command and control. The R3 world was bribery and guilt. So what I found out was if I could get underneath people's skin in a real way, not in a fake way, if I could get people to just love me and if what I wanted them to do made sense, and if I could get them to actually kick goals, not manufacture the goal, but actually get them to kick a goal themselves, and their confidence went up in me, I knew I could then send them into battle.
How do you do that though, John? I know you said about how to take them for a beer, take them for a coffee, but yeah, how do you do that?
You sometimes you have to let them fall, and you help them get up, but you do it in a not obvious way, right? You make them look good in front of their peers. You make them look good in front of the client, but you do it whilst knowing that progress is being made. You're not doing it just for the show. You're doing it just to make the progress. They feel I've made progress. I've got accolades. You know how many people just want accolades? They don't want money. They want accolades. Well, accolades first, money second.
Recognition.
Recognition. Yeah, recognition.
A lot of power in a well done.
Yeah. So you give someone recognition, then you know that when it comes to the dark times, when we're behind on systems integration test and friggin' new AT is falling apart, you can say, what do you think you can do this for me? They do it because they don't want to upset me. They don't.
Why did you look at Peter when you said behind there?
It's that guilt thing, but it works. But it's huge investment. Huge investment. Why isn't it more commonplace? Because project managers don't have the time. I mean, I don't have a family, but can you imagine if I had 3 kids? How do I invest that time? How do I tell my wife, there's a person here that I really need to work on. I need to have dinner with them tonight, and I need to help them see things a different way.
Yeah, I'd probably build on that and say that the good thing that you had was this enormous amount of energy. Like, it was just so obvious that you had this great energy. But the time that you would take to sit down with somebody and explain your thought process and what you were thinking, and it was so articulate and so succinct and so logical, that the time to do that, you felt invested, right? You were investing in the individual, and it's something I probably suffer at when I'm at a fast pace. I'm like, just look, can you just do it, as opposed to let's take the time out. I want to sit down and talk to you about it. So you do feel empowered, and I think you picked out quite a few people that you knew had got good ability to go beyond themselves, and you invested in them. And
Absolutely.
that's what
you don't do it with everybody.
No,
you do it with what I call the 4 pillars. because that's what keeps the roof up and the wall straight, right? You pick your 4 pillars and they're obvious. You know the 4 pillars within the first 2 weeks of the project. You know where the shiners are and you go straight for them. You invest with them. So that when somebody says a good project manager surrounds themselves with good people, I think that's what they mean. You can't do everything yourself.
There's
right?
also another bill on this. It's probably another segue into one of the questions,
Sure.
which is, the name of the podcast here, right? We're calling it God is in the Detail.
Yeah.
And you picked that because
Yeah, we'll talk about
we
that.
always talk about devils in the detail. And one of the things that you had above a lot of people I've ever worked with is the amount of detail that you were aware of and wanted to be across was frightening. So the point was that you were always felt off guard. So you wanted to be better because you knew you were going to get questions, So there's a bit of a carrot and a stick. There's the investment in the person, but you knew he knew more than you. So you wanted to basically go and invest that time into the detail. And the detail is absolutely pivotal. Can I ask you, why is it for you? Why is God in the detail? Why is that so important? Because you talked about your project management methodology.
Yep.
Why is God in the detail part of that?
Okay. Detail is at the lowest level possible. That's where everything happens or doesn't happen. The quicker you get there, the more information you have, the quicker you'll discover root cause if you've got a problem, and the quicker you'll get a solution in place. And the more decisive things will be in the detail. Detail is where everything happens. It doesn't happen up in the clouds. It happens down on the ground. So that's why for me, God is in the detail. God meaning the answer, right? The answer to, or the solution for that problem, or the appropriate design for this particular requirement, right? The higher you go, the blurrier that requirement gets and the blurrier the solution.
And why is that
the
so
clearer,
important? Why is that so important?
Because it saves time. It actually saves time and money. Detail saves time and money. People say, no, it doesn't, because if you dive into the detail too quickly, you could be off on a tangent, right? My view is when you get to the detail, you'll know. You'll know where the direction is. Up here, you can't see it. Somebody's telling you the lake is over there and I'm too high to see it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm a little bit lower, I can see it faster. I think it actually saves time.
I read a great line, I'm trying to remember it now, that mistakes are made from experience and experience is made from mistakes. No, actually, what is that?
Something like that. Yeah,
No,
I've heard that.
Cut that out of the script, but I'm going to ask this question.
Mm.
So you're talking about God is in the detail and you're talking about your project management style. At some point, you would have failed along the way to kind of get to a point where you feel confident what you do now. What were those failings and why do you think they were failings?
Oh, look, if an SAP project manager doesn't expect failings or problems in an SAP project, they're not doing an SAP project, or they don't understand it. Of course, there's going to be problems and failings. Well, failings in the sense that, you might make a wrong call too soon,
Mm-hmm.
right? But as long as you have a plan B and a plan C, as long as you can correct yourself from that.
Have you got an example of this?
An example of that. Oh, geez. So let's talk about testing, right? A lot of people say systems integration testing, which is testing the system end to end, should only involve the project, should involve anyone from the business, right? So you think, well, and the argument for that is if you bring them in a little bit earlier, then when those same people do UAT, they'll have some experience of the system. The UAT will be faster. I say as a concept, that's really, really good. But if you don't take the time out to pick the right people to come to the systems integration test, then you'll get redesign. So suddenly your scope will blow out. This person that you just in a hurry, just to show management that you're a broad thinker. I'm thinking creatively here. I'm going to bring your very own people out here sooner so that they can get more experience. If you don't take that requisite time to pick the right people, because I've been burnt by this, and you bring any shit, you get redesigned. People go, who said that we do credits like this, right? Remember we got some of this online and we had to swap that person out immediately because otherwise we were stuffed.
So the point you're trying to make is you start off, you do this big design, you do your big build, but you disappear for months on end. you come back and you try to get those individuals who helped you come up with the design back in for
Correct.
testing.
Yes.
They may not be available. First time they're looking at this is during system testing, and they weren't the original person who came up with the
Correct.
requirement.
So they're
And
redesigning.
it's like, oh my God, they're redesigning, which
Yep.
costs
Yep.
a lot of money,
Yep.
substantial amount of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's why I think Agile, moving away from waterfall to Agile, that's why I love Agile so much,
Yep.
is because you're getting that constant feedback.
Yep.
Yeah, what mantras do you have?
Right. My favorite mantra is God is in the detail, right? Because that God is good. There's answers with God. There's goodness, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to deal with the devil, right? The devil is up there in the clouds. He likes to keep things blurry. He doesn't want you. He doesn't want you to see the truth or the answer because he knows you're going to waste your time and money, right? So stuff you, devil. I'm going straight to the answer. I'm bypassing you. I'm going straight to the answer. That's what drives me on that. That's my favorite mantra. The next one is communicate, because I think that is one of the most important things on a project is people have to talk to one another to the point where you've got to think aloud. So don't wait 3 days to give me what you think of this. Tell me right now what you're thinking about it. I tell people exactly what's going on. I say, you know what? I think the director's going to get fired tomorrow. I just tell them I say what I know, you know. Again, that builds confidence. It connects people. And when I think aloud, so what I haven't quite assessed this, but what do you think about I'm thinking like this on this particular problem.
I love that kind of leadership because
Right.
Simon and I were talking about him sort of being quite open to everyone he works with. That leadership style is great. So you always know
what's
you're
in
sort of thinking.
Yeah.
You
And
can sort of
if
develop it.
your thoughts are flawed,
There's nothing worse than working with somebody and you're going, give me
people
a
who
sign, what's going on?
who don't
They
play
think,
their
yeah,
card,
yeah,
who hold
yeah.
their cards close to their chest. But if you think out loud,
Like Roy Keane, right? You're never going to confuse what Roy Keane thinks, right?
so especially if you've got architects or business people in the room, if you think out loud, they'll jump on something. They'll go, oh, no, that's a flawed thought. You can't go down that path. They save you time. Because here I am thinking I'm on the right path. I take the next 4 days out to bottom out my thoughts, write them down on paper, show it to them, and they go, this is a pile of crap. But if you're thinking out loud, they get it straight away. Now, they may think that you're a bit of an idiot. You're shooting your gun in all places. But I think that kind of approach in the IT world is generally accepted now. People like openness. People like back when I started, you don't do that. You figure everything out and then you tell everybody because otherwise they'll think you're an idiot who doesn't know what they're doing and you'll be off the project the next day. So times have changed. The next one is position. Always have a position on something. Even the first time somebody walks in the room and says, John, the pipe has burst. You should have an immediate position of it, even though you haven't asked questions, because as you develop a position, it forces you to think about that position.
What do you mean, an opinion?
An opinion, an answer, ready to go. Gun to the head, I call it, right? So,
but you're talking about an everyday project life where, hey, should we delay going live? Should we delay testing?
Yeah, someone walks in and says, today's UAT was meant to achieve, get us to 10%. It got us to 2%. You've got to have an instant position. No, let me think about it. I'll go away. Okay, can you grab the top 10 scripts that account for the biggest percentages for me? Position. Off they go. You know what I mean? You can't leave it open because then people start to drift. They start to come up with their own crazy ideas. But you've got to give them some sort of direction.
And I reckon that's
position.
Senior stakeholders, they really believed in what you were doing because you always had an opinion, whether they liked it or not, and it does give confidence. I get your point. Where you don't have a position, there's a vacuum.
No,
that's dangerous, right?
And you refine that position.
Yeah.
You either eliminate it and replace it with another position, but you're constantly refining it so that when you're ready to give the answer, bang, you're ready to go.
Yeah.
There's no,
Can you lean on other people to have that position? The reason why I asked, we had Alex Aiken on the podcast, and he made a good point that kind of resonated with me as well. He said if he's the smartest person in the room, he's in trouble.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it really
that's absolutely
resonate
true.
with me as well, because sometimes you get asked a question or it's like, I actually don't know.
Yeah.
And that's
Yep.
okay. And I'm going to tell people I don't know.
Yep.
And it's showing that kind of vulnerability that you don't know.
Yep.
And so what's your view on that?
It ask questions. Absolutely. Get advice. Right. But I would put thoughts in people's heads. So I might not know, but I would say, listen, what about this? What about that? Gather this information.
Is that manipulation again, or is that?
It's kind of. Now, the very last one. When the project wins, everybody wins. This is my favorite. Well, it's not my favorite. God is in the details. My favorite, but this one. This comes down to managing many different people from many different organizations, right? This so-called vendor management. The way I deal with that is not trying to force one vendor to talk to another. It's personifying the project. You make the project a person. You give it an identity, character, right? In most cases, I impose my own until I can find something in the business that makes it more attractive to the business, because it's good if the business likes it. But you make it the person. You refer to people by their roles, not by the companies they work for. You associate these roles with that person. So you are the hairdresser for this project. You are the physio for this project. What you do is you try and disconnect. You try and remove the organizational fabric, and you try and personify the project. You give it an identity. Remember, this is what we did with Lion.
Yeah.
And then people do things for the project. They don't do it for themselves or for me or for the client boss or for their boss. They do it for the project. And that's, what do we want to do? We want to make sure the project achieves what it achieves.
And
it wins, and everybody wins. Every organization will get the pat on the back. Their bills paid. The business will, the CEO will thank the business. That's all you've got to do is focus on that. Get personify the project. Make it a person.
Is your own experience one that consulting companies are being beaten off? Not
Yes.
That would have been your common experience back in the day.
Very early days, that was the first thing, because everybody wanted to be dominate the SAP market, right? And so you had everybody fighting each other. You try and focus them on the project.
So it's very hard to build a unified team. Is that when people are considering themselves as a vendor resource rather than actually we're here for the project?
Well, because they say my job is to do testing only. My job is to. So if you can mix and match a little bit, so you just stick to the roles. No, you have a role in the project. Don't carve off testing and say, if anybody walks into that ground, I'm going to shoot them, right? This demarcation mentality. No, you're the test manager, but guess what? That person over there is going to manage all of the defects for that testing. Even though that's not your role, that's their role. So you try and stick to the roles, the positions on the field, rather than, which club did they come from originally? Where do they live? What.
So with that approach, did you see individuals go above and beyond their actual scope? Then
they do, because the tester relies on the person who's doing the test relies on the fixer to get that defect fixed and back, so that they can retest and tick off. So if you play off the roles, it's in their best interest to help that fixer as much as they can. Otherwise, they're not going to get their fix tomorrow. They're going to get it next week. And then, they're going to be marked down for not doing their test on time. You see what I mean? So don't think, Arthur Anderson isn't doing their job. It's like, I think the defect guys, I think they're assigning the defect to the wrong fixer. So the assignment people, maybe there's a problem there. That's when the test manager or I would get involved, but it's all about roles, right? You're the test executor, you're the defect assigner, you're the defect fixer.
Just building on something that I just thought was amazing, and all of us do that we're working at Lion. You were brilliant. It's a bit like, I think Precision are great at this, branding, marketing. I never really understood that in the project. I mean, I sort of did around getting your project name right, getting clear around, what it is that you stand for in terms of your values as a project, et cetera, what sort of culture you want to bring. but actually denoting things you do in a really clever branding way. Like, testing wasn't just testing; it was, afterburner testing used to call some of the test spaces, right? You come up with all these terms, and it was so funny. The whole program, 300 people start using these terms that John had fabricated, but it was marketing these different milestones, and everybody started talking about this branding and this milestone, and it meant that everybody was cohesive in this is where we need to go next towards this milestone that's called afterburner testing, as opposed to just testing and it's very banal.
Or retesting.
And it did.
Because afterburner testing was a repeat of certain tests in certain areas where we had problems. But what a downer that is. But because our mainstream testing was Top Gun, right? It had the Top Gun theme. I thought, well, I'm not going to call it retesting. I'm going to call it afterburners. Let's turn the afterburners on, guys, and go supersonic. And, you get a much better buy-in. And it's more fun, right?
Mm-hmm. But there was consistency too. Everybody was aware of
the difference between afterburner testing and
inherently
Top Gun testing.
Inherently what we were doing, there was no confusion because the branding made it clear. Everybody knew that that's where we're heading next,
Yep.
So
I'm fascinated, John. Some of these terms and the way you manage people, and the word that keeps coming through is learn. And I'm fascinated how you manage a program, and I can see you get the best out of people. What I'd love to ask you, how do you manage those individuals that don't buy in to your methodology, don't buy into your vision, and don't buy into those names? How do you manage those people that go against the
lots of red wine. Lots of red wine. And if I feel in most instances it's because they're, I talked about character and personality just doesn't blend in with the project character and personality. This is why I keep saying, if you personify the project and you give it certain characters and flavors, we all want our project to listen to people. We want our project to consider that not every weekend can be worked. I'm just picking stuff now, but if you come across an individual that their personality, character, you've got to dismiss them. Simple as that. There comes a point in time where you point out that this is where the project is. This is where you are, because sometimes they could be too far above the project. It's not always about being below the project. It could be they're going too fast. The expectations are too quick, and it's like, well, you're not carrying the lowest common denominator along with you. And a project is only as good as its lowest common denominator, right? And it's only so much we can do with the lowest common denominator. Because if there's only one client person that knows that area, then that's it. That's them. We can't.
So it's fair to say his tolerance will be low.
Yeah.
So it's because look, the project is big. There are a lot of people. You can't spend too much time with people, but I do give them a go. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think you do give them a go, but I think it's unfortunately when you're in that project space. You've got to make some difficult calls pretty quickly. Because, we talked about this negativity, individuals bringing you down.
Yeah, I remember that.
Not part of the kind of the team culture and how much that can impact.
Absolutely. But you don't make it public. It's a very private thing. And I like to pick a social setting. That's the investment that I make over and above, the HR payroll, we're giving you your first warning. But we're giving you your second warning. I don't do shit like that. It's off the table, off the record. It relaxes them.
Yeah.
And I say, honestly, this is what I want from you. What do you want from me? What do you expect from the person that you're working with? And if I can't stitch that together in a social setting, then the work setting doesn't stand a chance.
That's where the red wine comes in.
That's where the red wine comes in. If that doesn't work, then how are we going to have peace and unity in a meeting room, where there are, stakeholders, there are people expecting answers? It's not gonna work,
Yeah. Hey John, question for you. So I know your sort of career has been very much, you take on these big projects and then you take 6 months off and you go travel extensively.
Yes. Yep.
I think you traveled every single country in Africa now, or
well, close to.
How many countries?
103 countries at the moment.
You've traveled 103 countries.
103 countries. 98 on the full UN membership. There's 98 of the 193, but 203 of the 198 because there's some observer countries and countries in dispute and
So
stuff like that.
103 countries.
103.
And
Yeah,
so,
let's call it. Yeah.
And I know during that
Yeah.
that travel, what you do is an awful lot of philanthropy. You run or own and fund an orphanage in Thailand.
I do, but what I do is I make comedy documentaries.
Oh.
Right, so like Adriana over there, I've got similar gear, but very highly compact gear, because otherwise you'll get it confiscated. You can't wear your cameras outside; they've got to be hidden in your body, and the microphones are tiny. I use all tiny stuff. I make comedy documentaries, which is a genre I think I invented in 1993 before the internet. I used to do it on VHS on the big cameras.
What do you mean by comedy? So
Comedy documentary. So I will interview people, locals, and I will say, tell me about this ancient monument here. What does this mean? I'll find somebody who knows something about it. I will dance with the locals. Teach me your customary dance, and I'll dance with them in my speedos.
Like Congo.
I do these in all these countries. Lions, I'll get out of the game car and go towards the lion because the local has told me the lion has just eaten. When the stomach is that big, it won't do anything. It's just sitting there. It's in a stupor, and I go and photograph it very close, and I do crazy stuff. But the idea of that is I bring it back, edit it, magnificent, fast music, subtitles, overlay, special effects, hold these big, huge launch events, 50 to 100 people. I usually do them on my birthday. So instead of gifts, I say donate. And I've got two particular places that I'm involved in directly. One is an orphanage in Bangkok, in the slums of Bangkok. Those kids, most of them have AIDS because they're children of prostitutes who have died. And there's an orphanage in Sierra Leone, in Freetown. There's actually 3 or 4 of them. And you remember in Sierra Leone, they cut the limbs off people during their civil war. Well, they take care of those people now. Those people are older and they've had kids, believe it or not. So they need help. So I put that money towards them. But that's what I do. So I travel. I can bring back this travel to my family and friends. Just family and friends. I don't put it on YouTube and stuff. It's on Vimeo because I think it's better quality. But I bring back. We all have fun. We laugh because the comedy documentary, it's funny. It's
really
comic.
Fascinating.
But you learn.
Yeah,
you learn
do,
at the same time.
Yeah,
comedy, documentary. I make some money. I give that money to. I use it for my charity. So I think it's a good.
Have you shown any of them on the programs?
Yes.
Yeah,
I often do because. So, for example, if we have a milestone event, I'll put one of my films on, and it's a riot. Check it out, johngolfin.com.
But the really interesting is, like we talk about
Lovely plug-in.
That's right. Get the plug-in.
I don't make money off of these. Like I said, I raise money indirectly for the charities. Right?
I just remember talking about resilience on my podcast and talking about how to stay resilient during an SAP project. It must be that when you come back from some of these places, and
some definitely
of the places you're in, they're really
they're horrible,
poverty-stricken.
Oh yeah,
and you're in there for weeks at a time traveling. Yep. And eating their food and, on your own for weeks. And you're coming back in the SAP project. It must feel so banal.
Well, it's like, I think, Jay, you said it, it's like somebody having served in the armed forces and having seen action, and they come back and they're running a project. Like one of my best friends, Paul Gardner, I'll mention Paul because he was a very, very good program manager. He was a captain in a submarine, in the Australian submarines. And I could see it in his face. You think this is a problem, you're under the water. You get a message from one of the guys in the back saying we're taking on water. You turn to your navigator and you say, how soon can you get us to the surface? And he goes, I can't. The back 2 compartments are going to flood, and it's like, quick, get everybody out of there. Because if he doesn't take these decisions, people die. But no one dies on an IT project. Yeah. No one dies.
It's the same on Amanda Oakenfeld's podcast when she came on. She was in the Navy and she was in the Air Force.
Absolutely.
Like, I've looked down barrels of guns, so what does it matter? Yeah,
exactly right. And I have faced, a spitting, angry Nigerian, 1 centimetre from my face saying, what are you doing here? You know what I mean? And then you think, I'm not going to mind if somebody raises their voice, where we're going through the test strategy, So you're right. It resets your whole frame of reference. You come back and you think, thank God we are living in paradise, compared to most of the world, and there's a lot of people out there living from day to day, from hour to hour, very desperate.
Yeah, we're very lucky. Very lucky.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring the question back to your projects.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about your favourite project.
Wow.
And why that is.
It stands heads above many. It was the what we call the top project, top project for rice growers in Leeton. They're known as Sunrise more recently.
Yeah.
And that was back in 96 to 98. I'd been hired by PW at the time, but to help build up their practice, right? They were new to SAP. They knew I was one of the first people on the ground. They knew I was very good at inventing delivery methods because I've invented many. And I said, we used that project to basically launch the entire practice. But it wasn't only great for that. The scope was magnificent. It was wall to wall. At that time, Rice Growers was a cooperative and they wanted to become a company and float on the stock exchange. So that was one project. Another project was a complete transformation of the way they did business because they wanted to break into export markets in a big way because they were basically the Australian rice industry. And the third aspect was wall-to-wall SAP, and I had to manage all three. Right? What do I know about a corporate? I'm standing in the boardroom because in those days the board wanted to meet the project manager, the board, not just the CEO or whatever. And that goes to show you they're all farmers and they're thinking, how much is this going to cost again? I want to eyeball the person that's going to run this. So I did a presentation in the boardroom and answered all the questions, went on like I am now. And then the CEO turns to the chairman and says, do you have any last questions or comments or whatever? And the chairman said, I hope we're not paying this guy by the word. And it just brought the house down. So that resounds in my head.
We're not either.
He used to come and visit the project on a Friday every afternoon and take us out for beers, the chairman. So we were in a building downtown. We all stayed in farmhouses, these big 3-4 bedroom farmhouses with acreage. The consultants would want to stay over the weekends. They'd bring their families down. We had parties in each different house every week, and we invited a different part of the organisation. So one week was marketing party with all the marketeers. Another one was sales party with all the salespeople, or packaging, or manufacturing, or what was back then milling, right? And we did this, and the connection we had with the business was unparalleled. You couldn't tell who was a consultant and who was a business person, or who was just a local. Just stopping by to watch why there's all these people in white suits and ties walking down the road in 42 degrees heat.
Yeah.
So it really brought us. It ticked all the boxes. Magnificent scope, magnificent people, magnificent setting. We had business process re-engineering people. We had accountants. Legal people. We had all sharing houses and it was unparalleled. That's where how do you deliver?
How was your liver?
My liver. Oh yes. Yeah. Well, that's a different story. But that's where I met John Penny, right, and Mark Miller. That's where we all forged these lifelong friendships.
Now, John, so tell me, what do you think a successful project looks like?
When you can sit down and consume 5 dozen oysters and wash them down with 5 bottles of Gewürztraminer, which is my favourite wine, in this very idyllic place called Victoria Point in Brisbane, with the Rice Growers program manager. that you worked with 23 years ago. That's what success is for me.
These friendships evolve.
These friendships, obviously the repeat business that PW got after the project. We did what we had to do. We were late. We went over budget and we were late because of many reasons. But
I think you're the first
yeah.
program director, project manager that ever said that.
Oh yeah,
by the way.
yeah. But
refreshing.
But if you do it by consultation, by consultation with the business, with the people that have hired you, with everybody in the same room has made that decision, it's a moot point after that. It's the new normal, right? If everybody understands it. So despite all of that, the business went on to do big things. They boomed in the export market. You want the business to be successful, right? They have to make money with the system or save money with the system, right? Otherwise, it's just a bunch of people having a good time, right? And that's not really all that great. But when you can have that relationship with the business and carry it forward, and you visit each other's houses and you baptize each other's kids, and that's magnificent. That's what success is for me. Not just the old budget tick, the box, timetable tick, but these relationships. And I still measure success that way. So I know I'm going to be seeing you and Matt Youngman and Con Kumakelis and Mark years after we finished our line project. And for me, that means we did something right. So another aspect of project success for me is when, for example, in the Line project, I had one of the data conversion guys who was only there for 3 months come up to me and say, I understand I've done my job and I need to go. I wish I could stay longer than 3 months, but that was his role. And we were going for 2 years then. It was a 3-year project. And he said, you know what? I have learnt more from just watching you and others in this project than I have in my entire university course. And I love that. When I hear that, I think if you can play out what you know, if you can perform the method or methodology, let's use that word, rather than constantly verbalize it but actually act it out, magnificent. And it sinks in and people see it.
By example.
Yes, it is. It is. It is magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. I love that. When I hear that, I'm thinking I'm doing something right here. And so are the people working with me, right? Because it's just as important that they act out the same way I'm acting out, know?
Yeah. So John, what do you think makes a good project manager? What do you think makes what's the secret sauce for a good project manager? I want to say project manager, I mean program manager, program director, CIO, delivery
any
director,
leader,
basically.
Yeah. Let me start by saying
in the project space,
what a project and an SAP project, what a project manager isn't, is someone who feels the need to have a plan at all times, an issue log at all times, and sits there ticking it off. That's not a project manager for me.
So that's different from position, yeah?
Yeah, it's different from position. I still think the grassroots, you've got to have a plan. You've got to have a plan, right? Planning is very important, characteristic to have, or always know what the road ahead looks like. Not because some QA person's going to ask you for it to tick off a box, but because you can use it to actually pace everybody. Right? You can set goals for people in terms of timeframes, right? So you remember how I used to say to people, let's time box stuff, because you may not know how long you need for something. You're designing a sales system for the very first time, but I know from experience that we can usually crack this in 2 weeks. So we're going to time box it. It's much like the agile technologies, right? Where everything's in sprints and you time box them. So the ability to time box and to set bookends, I think, is very important because it sets the scene for the team. Detail is obviously for me, a good project manager can consume detail and not choke, right? I'm not bagging people who operate at very senior levels, but if you have a very senior level person who can understand, who can quickly understand the detail of a problem that they're faced with, because this problem is going to mean the difference between, a 1 month delay and a 1 week delay. Then you've got to be able to lower yourself in there without choking. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think detail is extremely important. But for me, front and center is understanding people. People is, for me, is the key factor. A good SAP project manager will forget that they're a project manager for a bit and just focus on the fact that they're a person and there are other people in the room where they've all got a job to do, and they're going to become either a coach, a priest, or a parent, or a diplomat, right? And they're going to work out how this is the goal over here. These are the people to achieve the goal. How am I going to stitch them all together to achieve that? And what are the time-based goals I'm going to set for them to get there? So if that makes sense, people, planning, and understanding the end goal. So good SAP project managers, that's what they do. And they will go so far as to wheel and deal just to get a person, the right person to do the right job, and the right outcome to come about.
Do you think that's a lot easier when you're together in an office environment as opposed to being remote?
Absolutely.
And I know obviously we've been forced to work remote, at the moment. Do you have to adapt to that? And then if so, how?
Look, it's today's world, it's kind of impractical to have every single person, right? Because you can do development offshore, you can do testing offshore, you can now even do data conversion offshore, right? If you're allowed to. But the central pillars, like the person managing test execution, the person managing test fixing, the person managing training, the person managing environments, all these critical peoples who can trip over each other should be together in the same room. Now, if they can't physically be together in the same room, then they should be on bridges and connected on screen all the time, and with offshoots for very specific things that need to be done. When we got hit with COVID, March 2020, when all of a sudden no one come, it just happened on the spot. No one could come in. So I thought, well, when I get my pillars together, we basically get together in a room and we discuss what we need to discuss, and then we'll peel off. So person A and person B will go off and talk about fixing. Person D and E will go and talk about how we share the training environment with the testers, right? So we translated that to rooms. The team, the general, what I call, remember the major bridges and minor bridges. So the major bridge was all the heads, the people who are running all of the competencies. And the minor ones was if 2 of them or 3 of them had to get together in a subcommittee to solve a particular problem. And we had those going all the time. So you could unmute and say, what do you do? I've discovered this, or I think I've got an idea about how we might solve your problem. And that's how we got it. But co-location is extremely important. And in the early years...
And you're you love the face-to-face.
I do. I
think it's a struggle.
I do.
But at that stage when we went to remote, a lot of us knew each other and were comfortable working with
each other.
Well,
we were already in each other's pockets, right? So it made it easier. If COVID had hit at the start of the project, that would have been a very different equation, because we don't yet know each other. I mean, how do you bond with somebody on a screen?
Yeah, you can't.
It's very difficult. You've got to look at them in the eyes. You've got to see the little deflections in their face. And how do you share red wine on a screen? It's impossible.
Just one of the things you mentioned about your project management style, which I thought something you didn't mention. You talk about time box and getting people focused on the time box. You always used to talk about, which I thought was great, how project managers constantly have to make compromises all day long.
Oh, yeah.
And the critical path is what they should be focused on.
Correct.
So when they're thinking about decisions and compromising, it's always based on the critical path, which I thought was a great way of looking at it.
Absolutely.
Constantly doing that all day long. Is that
And that's the way not to lose or disengage people and say, I don't want to listen to you, help me understand how this dilemma affects the critical path. Because if it doesn't, then, goodness to you, you don't have to worry. Your slowdown's not going to affect the end result, right? So the go live date or the budget. So you've actually bought yourself some more time. Congratulations. So you can really inverse that. But yes, critical path is king.
But do you think knowing the critical path is also a thing? Because
you've got to know it off by heart. Project managers, but do you know the critical path for $1 billion project can go on one piece of paper? Critical paths are not, guys, it's not rocket science. I know it's not rocket science. And you need to know those critical path bookends off by heart. You hear people talking, and you go up and you go, no. The end of UAT is on this date, right? You don't have to worry about when the last lot of fixes will go in because they don't affect the beginning of UAT. So you've got to constantly remind people to go back to the critical path. And I put the critical path up everywhere. I even used to make placemats when we were in the office, and I said, you're going to have your lunch on the critical path because I want that thing to burn in your brain. Not because, I'm going to, it's a tick and flick exercise and I'm going to mark you down if you don't get to it because it's going to take the whole team to get to a milestone. A critical path milestone doesn't rely on one person. It relies on 1 million people, So the pressure's not on you, but you've got to understand, what you're doing, how it affects the critical path. And I usually like to explain it. People want a dependencies thing, which in practical terms doesn't work, not for big projects, right? I could spend half my life stitching up, dependencies, and then all of a sudden somebody does something and you've got to restitch it all over again. I manage through blocks, and then under those blocks is a more detailed plan, and under that plan there's a more detailed plan, and there's one person managing each one of those. And we all understand what the repertoire is. Why do I have to write that understanding down for an auditor? Because it takes 1 million years. Or an office full of so-called, what do they call them? Planners or whatever. And it's just a waste. It's schedulers. It's a waste of time. I get my 2 or 3 key pillars to talk to one another, and we all know. We all know how it cascades. I know that if Jay delays, he'll delay me. If I get delayed, you get delayed. But you're the critical path guy. So,
and that comes from experience, I think, really.
It does. Which
is a good segue, I think, into probably our last 2 questions.
Yeah, it's a good segue. I mean, you've got a lot of experience, obviously. But now, looking back, what would you tell your 21-year-old self?
What would I tell my 21-year-old self? Don't go back to uni. Get that job. Get experience. Get experience first, uni second. If somebody always expect your first job or 2 or 3 to be something you don't want to be doing, but you're going to learn shitloads from it. If you can learn shitloads from it, you do it. If you have to drag concrete across a field, but it's going to make you stronger and better, you do it. Do that. Don't expect your first or second or third job to be what you studied for or what you like. And I have first-hand experience of that. I didn't design a plane as my first job. I used COBOL to do a billing program. So, but I learned from it. Learn from it. Expect that first job to be one that you don't want to do, but don't do any old job. Do a job that you're going to learn from, right? If it doesn't tick all the boxes, learn from it, and then progress to the areas. Then go back to uni. You go back to uni with your employer sponsoring you. Then go on and do the job that. So that's what I would say to the 21-year-old self, and don't drink too much. Pace yourself because you'll be amazed how long your life is.
That was brilliant, absolutely fantastic today. A lot of insights. What I'd love to know, John, because you've obviously met a lot of characters in your time, a lot of good program managers, a lot of good directors and leaders. But who would you like to see on this podcast?
Matthew Norser. And let me tell you why, because Matt joined Arthur Andersen a year ahead of me. Magnificent delivery guy, different personality to me, just more measured, more... he gave his team around him a lot more autonomy and versus me in the early days. I used to really try and micromanage people a lot when in the early days. But Matt rose to the heights of delivery, fantastic delivery guy, very well known to SAP. And then he became an SAP salesman, or salesperson, I should say, and rose to the top of that. So what has always been eating big SAP project managers is this trade-off between selling it and delivering it. Always. This has been a bane. It's been a,
what did you
bane of our lives.
And you want us to deliver that?
Yeah. What the heck? Yeah.
You can do it in 2 months.
Exactly right.
In the dark.
So if you want one person that understands now both sides of those coins intimately, do you know how interesting would that be? Is the trade-off between selling and delivery? He's still in SAP, working. I think he's working part-time, and he is now instructing salespeople.
Oh, right, wow.
He was that good. He's instructing salespeople. So he's a Yoda plus. He's got Padawans left, right, and centre. And I've got to tell you, that would be interesting because he appreciates both sides. He did both roles. He's the only person one of many people or few people that can answer that dilemma because he did both.
Great.
Fantastic. What a podcast.